Good morning. I am Nick Rishwain, and welcome to Legal Tech Live. For those of you who are regular watchers or followers, you know that I am in the legal tech industry, have been for about 6 years. I went to law school, but I do not practice, and I like what's going on with legal and technology combined, and that's why and how this broadcast and this show has started, where we work on a platform to evangelize legal technology. And with us today, joining me today, is Adella Toulon Forrester. Adella is a dedicated legal professional with over a decade of experience in the alternative currency space. In 2001, she helped build one of the world's first customized online gold-backed payment platforms. Her legal thesis, Bitcoin Strength in Numbers, detailed Bitcoin's possible disruptive effects on the status quo of legacy banking. Adella has spoken extensively on cryptocurrencies, the regulations surrounding them, and remittance markets. Adella is passionate about blockchain technology and looks forward to the world where the disenfranchised and the or underbanked can truly reap the benefits of decentralized technology. And this is fascinating, and I'm really looking to understand more about the legislation and the regulations surrounding these cryptocurrencies and the advancements that we're seeing both legally and technology with the cryptocurrencies. Adella, welcome.
Hi, it's really awesome to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. And does that bio sum up everything? And maybe you can bring us a little bit of additional information about yourself. How did you get involved in Bitcoin and the legal implications and advancements of Bitcoin?
Yikes. So I worked with a lot of developers in the early 2000s, and one of them sent me a message and was like, hey, I don't know if you remember Cryptics. Do you remember Cryptics at all?
I do. No.
Yeah. So one of them sent me a message and was like, hey, Dels, look at this. Check this out. Let me know what you think about it. And I was like, And then shortly after, Dr. Charles Evans, an economist down in Florida, he's done so much research. He was actually expert witness on the Espinosa case, an old friend of mine as well, sent me a message and said, Dels, check this out. He had previously, he was my external advisor for my previous thesis that I had done on offshore financial centers. And, so we've maintained like a really cool relationship over the years. And when Dr. Evans tells you to look at something, you look at it,
Okay.
Yeah. So I checked out the white paper, and of course, my very first reaction was, "What the AF, right? What is this?" It's extremely complicated, and trying to parse out utility when no previous example had existed was just really, really tough. I think Nick Szabo had talked about stuff like this before, but nobody was really talking about it. So it took me a year, I have to say. It took me a year to really kind of start to even grasp the concept. And then, I asked a million questions to a lot of people who knew a lot better than I did. And
Sure.
I was like, holy, this could be amazing for remittances. And, I had been very passionate about financial inclusion and being an immigrant, being a woman from the Caribbean, seeing people sending money back home all the time and paying like immense, like horrendous fees. This is always very near and dear to me. So
Right.
my first thing was, wow, remittances. The second one was, as a libertarian, was, free remittance.
Yeah, I can see that. I feel that as somebody who's leaning more that way these days. It's you can see that. Yeah, this an actual free market.
Right.
Yeah.
So really interesting story, right? I gave this talk in Florida back in 2013 or 2014, and this really cool girl comes up to me after, a really young girl. She's like, I loved your talk. I was talking about remittances. And she pulls out a fake ID and she's like, look what I got on Silk Road. I was like, we never had this conversation. Sorry,
Right.
sweetie, if you're looking at this show.
Right. Oh, that's funny. And you mentioned Silk Road. Maybe we can give people a little background on it, because really my first experience with Silk Road, not that I ever actually had an experience on the website, um, my first experience was in my day job as the vice president of experts.com, where I deal with marketing expert witnesses. I saw a story come across about Dr. Evans, in that he had served as an expert witness in this case, and that he had been paid in Bitcoin. And that kind of got my attention. So can you give us a little background on Silk Road? Seems to be the major high-profile Bitcoin case that maybe some are aware of, and probably many are not, because it was, if you're paying attention to major cases, major trials, criminal trials, then you might have heard something about it, but been a little unfamiliar with what exactly took place. Can you give us a little feedback on Silk Road and maybe the implications of that trial?
Well, since it was the first high-profile Bitcoin thing that went down, and I'm not going to mince any words today. I'm going to tell you the truth.
Sure.
Bitcoin is really great for sketchy things. Okay? It is really amazing. It's an amazing, if you want to call it a currency, it's amazing currency to do really just nefarious shit,
Right.
That's the way that it is. I mean, at the time, there was no way to really track. I don't think the powers that be had the know-how to really track transactions. I mean, obviously now we know that you can do that with a lot of work, but it is very possible. And so, right now, it's a boon for law enforcement if they want to track, bad actors, transacting with Bitcoin.
And so, are they able to track it very easily? Is it?
Not easily, but it is possible. It is possible. It's not completely anonymous. Like we've got to understand that it's not an anonymous currency.
Yeah, it is currency. Yeah. And it seems to be oftentimes associated with nefarious things. But my understanding from our mutual friend, Eric Grill, is that, but that's not all it's used for.
Oh, no.
But it seems to be associated with that significantly right now.
Hey, nobody was really thinking about remittances at the time. I mean,
right.
A bunch of nerds got together, built this thing, and said, you know what? We're going to open a free market. You can buy whatever the hell you want.
Okay.
Using this platform.
Right.
So, that's what I mean when I say that.
And then it was essentially abused by nefarious things, and Silk Road seemed to be or maybe not abused, but it was anybody who was trying to do something a little sketchy realized that they might be able to make some money using this and maybe hide it for a while longer.
Hey, one man's sketchy is another man's weed stash.
That's right. That's right. So, and so then what took place? What was Silk Road? Can you share that with us to the best of you? I know it's probably not your...
Yeah, not really my area, but basically an open marketplace where people could buy anything.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And
so like a bazaar in like China.
Right. And then they ended up finding somebody responsible for running it, I think is how it happened, and prosecuted this individual.
Sure. And mind you, this is nothing terribly different than transacting in cash. I could step out right now and find anything, buy anything. Just the difference was the platforms. I can do it, in real time, or I can do it online.
Right. Right. And so your experience then, you thought of it as remittances, and you mentioned that you've seen as an immigrant to the U.S., you saw it as valuable for sending money back home. Is that right?
Yeah.
And why is that? How does that work?
What do you mean?
Why Bitcoin as opposed to current forms of sending money abroad?
Well, so what do we have right now? We have banks, we have Western Union, we have MoneyGram. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have with those transactions? Really high fees. So when I saw how little the fees were with Bitcoin, it was just a no-brainer. Like, wow, we could really use this and sort of disrupt the status quo of the remittance market. Unfortunately, the remittance market is a huge one. It's like over $500 billion a year that people are sending,
Sure.
I don't think the network is equipped to handle that kind of movement at this time. And we haven't really seen a big blockbuster in the space as far as remittances are concerned. I know my friends Gabriel Abed, Bit down in Barbados. They're working on something right now, a big remittance market platform that would enable people with diaspora here to send money easily back to the Caribbean and Latin America.
Interesting. That's fascinating, because what we experience here, I'm in the Central Valley of California, and this is pretty interesting to me. I've got a family member who is in a local kind of convenience store market who offers the Western Union. Well, what we have is, especially at this time of year, a massive influx of immigrant labor who work hard here, and then they send the money back home generally to Mexico, as we have a big Mexican population in the Central Valley, and they send it back to Mexico. Well, they have this money that they work incredibly hard for, and then they send it back, and they have to pay large fees in order to do that. So if you have $500 to send and you're taking a big chunk of that, big percentage of that to send it to your family, it really harms them in a way that, I mean, how long did they have to work in order to get that money and then have a big chunk of it taken just to send it abroad?
Man, people don't get it. You usually come here for three reasons, right?
Right.
Your parents are sending you to school. Okay. You met somebody that you love, or maybe, it's mutual.
Right. Right.
You come here for a better situation.
Yeah.
You come here to better your life.
Right.
I think those are the three main reasons. Of course, there are millions of reasons. Mine are different. But I've certainly worked. My friend has a restaurant down the street, and I was helping her out. And I was in kitchen working with people from El Salvador, Guatemala, and I mean, the stories that I heard were heartbreaking. People just working for, sorry, friend, $5 an hour. And every Friday sending money back home. They're sending kids to school. They are paying for operations, hospitalization, all sorts of things. Quinceañera. Mainly supporting families back in their countries. And it's amazing to see how hard they work. They don't have any of the labor laws applying to them, so they're busting ass all day. Talking about getting to work and working 15 hours a day. Yeah.
And then a big chunk of that taken when
MoneyGram or Western Union, you're paying 10%, 7 all the way maybe to 15%. I've seen the fees be very high. Yeah. Western Union just sent me back $22. I sent money, and evidently they had applied a wrong percentage to the money. So I don't know yet what the deal is. I haven't called them yet.
Right. That's interesting, though, that they actually applied the wrong percentage and decided to correct that. That is surprising to me. That is not what I would assume is a common experience.
I'm still shocked.
Yeah. So do you use, when you send money abroad, just on a personal, if you do, we'll use it since you mentioned Western Union. Are you still doing it Western Union, or are you doing Bitcoin as well?
It's funny. There's some African guys that I buy some crafts from, and I will use Bitcoin for that.
Okay.
But if I'm sending money back home, and I usually, send money back home, I did a brunch for my cousin. I send my, set up lunches for my aunts and my mom, sort of thing. Happy birthday. I usually go with, shame on me, MoneyGram or Western Union.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that just ease of use at this point?
Ease of use. I mean,
Okay.
I know no way where they would be able to change it
To cash out the Bitcoin and
yeah,
actually, yeah, right.
yeah.
Which was what Eric Grill sort of was showing me with his Bitcoin ATM, which was something that was, this is all groundbreaking stuff for me personally.
Shout out to Eric, by the way. Can we
Yes,
do that?
yes. Shout out to Eric Grill for connecting us, one, and for two, opening my eyes to Bitcoin as a currency and as a lot more than a currency. And maybe we can get into some of those things. Let's talk about the legal. You work in a law firm right now
Yeah.
as a consultant on cryptocurrencies.
Mm-hmm.
What in the U.S. are we dealing with? What sorts of regulations are going? I realize that's a really broad question for a show that's supposed to go in the 45 minutes or so, but are we seeing federal laws being enacted, or federal regulations, or are states trying to address this? Maybe we can start with that.
Okay, so before we even go there, and I'll try to keep that section as succinct as possible to get as much across as I can. But I was a VP of Operations and Special Projects for Coin Outlet, Eric's company.
Okay.
Where we rolled out all these ATMs, and so that's how I really got started in the sort of convoluted world of Bitcoin law, if you may. So yeah. So there we go. So like I always like to think of the laws surrounding Bitcoin, and then again, when you talk about Bitcoin, what are you talking about? You're talking about the peer-to-peer network. You're talking about the currency. Let's just call it law of Bitcoin.
Okay, for now.
Yeah. So it's very convoluted. There are many, many, many gray areas, and at the federal level, what you have is a bunch of agencies just applying different guidances and scope, even on what we're supposed to do with this thing. I mean, the poor guys who drafted these, the laws, the Banking Secrecy Act, Commodities Act, and whatnot, just had no idea that something so complicated would come about, or people would have computers in their pockets.
Right.
So at the federal level, most notably, we have FinCEN, and of course, important to note, guidances are not regulations.
Right.
Guidances take existing law and say, here's how you're going to apply this. We're using the existing law, and here's how we're going to apply it. So I think effectively it is in effect, but officially, of course, they're not, because if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you will get fined. You could go to jail. I mean, we saw this with Bernard von Nothaus back in, 2000s. So yeah, so FinCEN applies the BSA, the Banking Secrecy Act, and AML, KYC, so anti-money laundering laws and know your customer rules, to anybody, to any exchanger, administrator, not so much users, but basically if you're moving value around and making a profit from it using Bitcoin, you're transmitting, you have to register with FinCEN as a money transmitter. And it's interesting because so you have all these guidelines at the federal level, and then you have the state by state rules, which are all different ones. At the state level, it's all licensure at that point. So, I mean, they're as different from night and day. I mean, you could have, one set of rules in Virginia and another set of rules in Maryland.
Right.
So
FinCEN, then this is the from the United States Department of Treasury, and this is the Financial Crimes Enforcement. Network. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, if you are transacting business in Bitcoin, you have to be registered with FinCEN. Okay. And probably that's who you want to It looks like we have a question from Jay. I'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
You'll want to register with them, and you probably want to follow their rules, even above the state rules.
You definitely have to.
Okay.
You don't want to, but you have to.
Okay, good to know.
You really have to follow their guidelines on everything. So, for example, if you're transacting certain amounts, you need to file transaction reports. So you need to plug into their BSA e-filing site. You would need to file suspicious activity reports. Every applicable company would have to do a risk-based assessment, and then institute an AML KYC program and compliance program that is commensurate to that. Have a compliance officer, have an ongoing compliance education program. It's quite extensive and intensive, but it's not as complicated as it sounds.
Okay, because it's feeling to me the way that you were explaining it as a real barrier to entry for a Bitcoin startup.
Not at the FinCEN level, and I always tell this to people. I thought it would be, but not at the federal level. I feel like it's a lot harder on the state level. It could be a lot harder on the state level, because at least at the FinCEN level, at federal level, the rules are there. They're there. You reach out to them and say, listen, here's what I'm doing. Can you apply guidance to this? Can you give me an administrative ruling? And they will do it. They pretty much have an open door policy when it comes to that. They're very, as far as like government agencies go, they're cool.
That's interesting to hear. That's good to hear.
Listen, it could be a lot worse.
Right.
Right. I've seen a lot of sketchy and nefarious stuff, so could be a lot worse.
And I think you mentioned earlier, and we should mention again, just because they apply a guidance to your firm or something like that does not mean that you may not get in trouble for what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Oh, and the business also has to undergo regular independent testing and reviews. But here's the thing, at least, you have these guidelines, you at that point would understand how to enforce them. Some others are not so straightforward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. And let me get to a question from the audience, which is Jay Giuliano today, who is the creator and CEO of PatDeck LLC. Jay's actually in your region. He's in the DC area. He's a patent attorney, and he has started PatDeck LLC to make patents better. And he asks, would you recommend that startups accept Bitcoin for software as a service in light of what you're saying about FinCEN? Would this be another payment for? And correct me if I'm wrong here, Jay. Are you asking us to make this as a payment form for your software? Would you recommend that they set themselves up to accept Bitcoin as payment for software as a service?
So this is not legal advice.
Sure. Nope.
It would depend on exactly what they're doing. But I mean, why not?
Okay.
If you're just accepting Bitcoin and you're paying your taxes, you are reflecting exactly what you're doing, completely transparent about it, then I don't see why not. But one of the things that we like to do at our firm is we like to take a forensic look into the business practices of all of our clients, because that way we can, it's such a gray area. It's a measure twice, cut once maxim, and it's just safer for us to look at exactly what you're doing so we can give better advice.
Okay. All right. And he does bring up a great point here as a startup company.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to have to hire a compliance officer merely to receive Bitcoin as a payment. It sounded like FinCEN requirement would require such.
Well, it depends, right? So for FinCEN, you would have to, if you're an individual or a business that just exchanges Bitcoins for goods and services, you're not a money transmitter.
Okay. You're not transmitting, you're only accepting. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
In which case, the
services and SaaS, would definitely fall under that. So,
okay. Good to know.
Probably. Okay. Because again, I'm not taking a forensic look to see exactly what's going on.
That's good, good information and good to know. And how are you helping? Are you working on legislation in your company, or are you helping to guide clients through accepting Bitcoin? If you can share anything about that, about your daily work.
Yeah, so I parse through a lot of white papers,
Okay.
looking for utility. I, with my team at the firm, we go through a lot of, oh my God, a lot of startups, side chains, lots of side chains,
Okay.
side chain type companies and startups. They need advice. Just, anybody in this space. By the way, every time we say space or ecosystem, somebody should take a sip of whatever they're drinking.
We're going to make it a drinking game.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right.
Let's do it. I'll do it in my coffee.
All right. I've got some water here that I'll.
It's like buzzwords, right?
Buzzwords, yes.
Yeah. And you can call me out on it. But,
Okay.
but yeah, we see everything from Bitcoin kiosks. I'm not going to call them ATM machines because it's redundant. Bitcoin ATM machines. So Bitcoin kiosks or alt currency kiosks, that need to institute AML KYC programs, compliance programs. They need a compliance officer. They reach out to us.
Okay, so it's pretty broad right now because it is such a specialized area, and somebody who's looking to get into it basically needs some assistance.
Predictive markets. A lot of people are looking into predictive markets right now. So that's another huge thing you see people, come to us about tokenization. So as far as policy is concerned, I work primarily on that side in the Caribbean and Latin America.
Okay.
There are enough people doing stuff here, and they're very good at it.
Okay.
But certainly I'm very vocal in Washington. But Caribbean, Latin America, I've done stuff with the UN, ECLAC. I'm writing a policy paper right now for a think tank called Capri on how banks in the Caribbean can use the blockchain to mitigate the loss of corresponding banking relationships.
Interesting.
Because there's a lot of that going on right now. So yeah, I hope that's very long-winded, but
no, that's good because this is, it's all new to so many people. It's new to myself, and I talked with Eric about this about 8 or 9 months ago, and learned so much from him. But then, if you're not in it on a daily basis, just like anything, if you're not practicing it, it is one of those things that you sort of forget about. Right. Or it's out there, and I need to learn some more about that because it may be a good investment idea for me as a personal investor. Right. But I, don't spend enough time doing it. So there's so much here. I feel like we could do a much longer conversation about it. I know we could.
Of course, yeah.
But I'm just trying to give people some tidbits about what they need to be looking at. So FinCEN seems to be the major regulator. Would that be a starting point for a company who's looking to get involved in some sort of a Bitcoin operation? Should they visit fincen.gov and start learning about it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. They should. Yeah, and then you should probably give us a call at Cogent.
Absolutely. We
actually have free legal advice for a couple hours every week. So, just our part in the whole financial inclusion thing. As a firm, I hate firms. I've always right? Don't you hate firms? Do you like firms?
Well, the firms that I worked in before I gave up the idea of practicing law, I liked because they were small firms.
Okay.
My experience with large firms, not you, Jay. You are a fantastic individual and the exception to the rule. But my experience with large firms is much different. Right. But so I can't say that I hate them, and I wouldn't say that I hate them because it is part of my job to deal with firms. So I wouldn't say that I hate them, but I do think that the larger the operation, the more difficult they are to deal with. And that goes for, strong word. Yeah, and that goes for corporations as well. The larger the operation, the worse it is. So start with FinCEN, reach out to Cogent Law Group, reach out to Adella. Of course, you can find her at Bitcoin Khaleesi, which is fantastic. You said you were new to the Twitter game, so did you combine Bitcoin with Game of Thrones? Was that how you did it? Did you decide?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I'm getting my name.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, actually I read the books like a gazillion years ago, and Daenerys is not my favorite character by any far stretch of the imagination, but I just listen. It was a come to Jesus moment. I was laying there watching an episode, and I was like, Bitcoin Khaleesi, yes.
It's a fantastic handle. It's a great Twitter handle. When Eric sent it to me, I thought, who is this person that you're asking me to, at first I was like, Bitcoin Khaleesi, who is this person you're asking me to interview? But as I did research, I was like, oh, I see. Yep. Okay. I like this, and the Twitter handle, you just never know who the person is until you start doing some research. It's like, I see, Eric. Good point. You have set me up with somebody who really knows what they're doing here.
And I've kept my head under the sand for a long time. I was pretty vocal, in the earlier days. Now there's been a shift. The first civil war in Bitcoin was the core versus classic war. Okay.
Tell us about it.
And wait, I'm gonna get there.
Okay.
So, and then the shift went from Bitcoin maximalism to blockchain agnostics. So, if you want to get any sort of core or classic person on your side, real quick, or unite them real quick, all you have to do is just say this guy over there is like a blockchain agnostic.
Right. So it's cliquish that way. It's very cliquish in whether or not they're a core or a classic or an agnostic or so. Right. Interesting.
Right. And it's basically, size versus speed. I mean, we shouldn't get into it because it's pretty technical, but suffice it to say that there is internal trouble, on the protocol.
Okay. Yeah, and it may be that is probably something that we'd need to do a specific entire conversation about what that means and why. Jay does ask another good question. Is there a particular Bitcoin wallet or a group of them that you recommend? And this is a great question because when I was looking into Bitcoin and looking into Bitcoin exchanges as well, I'm like, how do I know who's legit and who's not? So that probably goes for the wallet. Are there any recommended, and you can recommend them personally, it doesn't have to be as a member of Cogent Law Group or anything like that. Is there?
Yeah. Sorry to all of my friends out there. You guys are great programmers, but I always love blockchain.info.
Okay.
I think it's pretty old school, but my very personal second favorite is Airbits, and number 3 is Mycelium.
Okay, so I'm going to put
Mycelium is kind of like a red hat of Bitcoin wallets. I don't know if you're a Linux guy, but I had Red Hat back in the day, like
I love it.
Early 2000s,
Okay.
So I started using Mycelium. I'm like, oh my god, like, is there somewhere we can type in like command lines here? Like, this is.
And so it's
a little hardcore.
And how do I spell that so I can put that in the notes? It's MY. And then
CELIUM.
Is that mycelium.com?
Mycelium, oh my god. Just type it in your
gotcha.
Play Store.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there was one more you mentioned, blockchain.info, Mycelium.
Blockchain.info, and Airbits.
Airbits. AIRBITS.
BITZ.
BITZ. Excellent. All right. Yeah. So there you are with some wallets, Jay. What about for the new user or myself or a layperson what type of an exchange, or are there recommended exchanges where I might go to purchase Bitcoin? Should I want to go there? Can't go there.
I can't.
Fair enough.
I can't go there.
Fair enough.
I can't go there. I mean, as you've seen with Bitfinex, I just personally at this point, I keep most of my Bitcoin cold. I store it cold.
Okay.
I'm not messing around with exchanges.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Yeah, so I'm not going to recommend anything
Good.
lest there is a next week hack. Because,
Gotcha.
in keeping with Bitcoin season 2, there seems to be a lot of hacking and recursive attacks and all sorts of things.
If you have questions about it, reach out to me. I can put you in touch with Eric Grill, who can explain certain things to us, and maybe he's got some recommendations that he'd be more happy to discuss personally for anybody listening to this later. Jay asks, and another great question, what do you mean storing cold?
Yeah, so it's not online. It's harder for thieves to get to it. I should have brought my little Ledger wallet downstairs. I have a little Ledger wallet thingy, and it's like a little thumb drive thingamabob.
Okay.
And you can store them on that. Trezor is good as well. So Trezor and Ledger, can't go wrong. You have it there. You keep it safe. Your Bitcoin is safe from all sorts of bad actors.
Right. Interesting. Okay. And I didn't realize that there were, I had, when I talked to Eric, now, again, this has been several months, maybe closer to a year now. Bitcoin it was being hacked regularly or attempted, but it was strong and able to fight those off. Is this become a bigger issue, being able to fight off the hackers? Has there been damage done to the blockchain?
The blockchain, no. Ethereum, the recent DAO hack on Ethereum chain or protocol, whatever you want to call it, that was a cause for concern. As far as security goes.
Okay.
But as for the Bitcoin blockchain itself, I haven't really heard much about security issues.
Okay. Yeah. And so is that a concern for somebody who holds as a holder of BitChain? As a Bitcoin, are you fearful that what you own may one day disappear?
You mean it's magic currency that I have?
Right. Because I think that from a layperson standpoint, or a listener, or somebody who has no experience, and you're telling me my money's out in the cloud somewhere, how do I know that it's safe?
Yeah, you don't. It's trust, again, to bring in another US dollar tenant. It's trust. You just don't know.
Okay.
I love Airbits because I think it's a really secure wallet. I know Mycelium is as well. Blockchain.info, all the ones that I gave you, great ones. I never store anything hot that I can't afford to lose.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this is magic that was created out of almost thin air. Well, a lot of hashing power, but out of thin air for the most part.
Right.
That I own.
Right.
And then, of course, you as a lawyer would understand the question of ownership too.
Yeah.
What would constitute ownership versus like possession?
Right. And to take a non take a phrase out of the law that possession is 9/10 of the law. Exactly. That can also apply to my money that's held in my bank right now. Right. Exactly. I may not be
technically you don't really own that either,
right.
So.
but I think I can go and get it. But we see it on occasion when a country goes bankrupt, or they're having, and all of a sudden people in that country cannot get the money out from the ATM. You've seen it. We've seen it numerous times over the years. Like all of a sudden we're not letting anybody take any money. So because it feels like it's my money, or because I have that statement that says how much is in there, doesn't mean. So this, I would say, would be kind of the same concern. You have to go with trust.
Right.
Jay asks, on a personal level, do you agree? And Jay, and you're way ahead of me here, because I am not familiar with the Ethereum reboot post hack. On a personal level, did you agree with the Ethereum reboot post hack? No. Okay. Tell me about it. What did it mean?
Well, so here's the thing. So this company called Slockit wrote the smart contract called the DAO, and put it on the Ethereum chain,
Okay.
or use Ethereum protocol, I should say. Stuck it on top there, right? And it's basically like a crowdfunding sort of experiment, where people could invest on certain things by consensus.
Okay.
Maybe an oversimplistic way to put it, but it's basically what it was. And so when there was the attack, so a lot of things happened right before they deployed this thing, right? The DAO. There was a very scant auditing, so there was hardly any code auditing. That's all, like a 3-page report. There was also a very widely distributed and read paper called "Moratorium on the DAO," something like that, by one of the writers was Professor Eamon Gunsu, who's like one of the smartest guys in the States, right?
Okay.
And it basically outlined all of these possible attacks, and I thought to myself, my God, if I wanted to engage in how you could engage in collaborative efforts to hack this thing,
Right.
or to beat the system. So yeah, all of those things were just ignored by Slockett, who just decided to, what I thought, prematurely deploy this thing.
Okay.
I think, when you're talking about millions of dollars at the time, it was like $150 million we're talking about. So they went ahead and did this thing. I understand it's experimental.
Right.
And then, so the hacker or the recursive attacker,
Okay.
managed to siphon out like all this money using, basically not really doing anything that went against the code that was actually there and written, but so maybe poorly audited.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the wake of that, Ethereum decides to fork, kind of do something like a rollback. Wait a second. It just brings a lot of questions. It raises a lot of questions. First of all, who are the interested parties?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you take responsibility for something that sits on your platform?
Mm-hmm.
Is this using the proof of work protocol or not? Were the transactions immutable or not? And then you go back to some bigger questions like, how centralized is this? Is this a decentralized application, or is some guy sitting there making decisions like God on what to do with funds? No different really than our central banks.
Our central banks. I was going to say, it sounds similar to a central bank.
And corporatism,
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Bailouts. I mean, what was that about?
Right.
Yeah.
As we'll take a particular part of the market and bail them out.
We need to fist bump on it. Come on, let's fist bump.
Fist bump.
Bam.
Yes. Yeah, let's just cut out this sliver and we'll save those. And then we'll save this one over here, but the rest of you're on your own. Brings me, I guess, to the question of, it's a broad question again, but what is it that the central banks or the national governments are afraid of with Bitcoin? Which is, I'm sure, many things, but they seem to be anti. Is it because they can't control it? They seem to be generally anti-Bitcoin. Again, this is from a layperson's perspective. When I hear Bitcoin, they almost always are like, well, we don't trust that. This may be news-based only, what I'm getting that from. But it feels to me like there is a fear of Bitcoin from national governments or central banks. Is that accurate?
I'll tell you what. So I'll start with the Caribbean and just sort of the Eastern Caribbean and Jamaica, actually.
Okay.
What I have found is that there's an openness. At first, everybody was like, "Okay, this is crazy. This is some crazy stuff,"
Right.
It's
wizardry,
sorcery,
right.
And then what I've been seeing right now is that governments are reaching out because they want to understand what it is. Again, I told you I was writing that paper for this think tank down there. People want to know what it is and how it can change life and help people.
Okay.
So that's a general idea that I'm getting from the governments down there, and even some of the local banks. Actually, have a credit union has reached out to me from the Caribbean, among other people. So regulators are starting to question, how do we regulate this thing? How do we deal with it?
Okay.
From down there. The vibe that I get up here, and I'm in DC, so
Right.
I'm always around these guys. It's not so much of a fair, and I feel as if when I go to functions, and I didn't think that would be the case, but I get the feeling that they want to preserve the technology.
Okay.
They don't want to squash the technology, right? I get the feeling that they understand that they need to be more educated on what it is. So what you see is that they're hiring a lot more experts in the field.
Good.
To give guidance.
Okay.
I don't see that fear.
Okay.
I don't see the fear, because I think, for like what I've noticed with for example, the feds, the FBI even had a conversation with a guy from the FBI and the NSA, where they were like, yeah, we kind of get it right now. Looking for bad actors. This is kind of good. Most of them have an open door policy as well. When I say most of them, I'm talking about FinCEN, the SEC, FINRA. You can go in and talk to people. They encourage that. When I say go in, please make an appointment. Don't say
sure. Don't just show up and
I'm here now. Adella
out Adella's name.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I see a willingness. I see a willingness to learn and to really engage in the community, to understand what it is.
That's interesting. That gives me hope, because my understanding, and this could have just been pure perception on my part, that it was something that the central governments and central banks had feared. So I'm glad to hear that there's an adjustment to that. And it sounds like they want to preserve the technology, and that's fantastic. From a more of not a litigation standpoint, but a transactional standpoint, and maybe you can just, we're running out of time here. Maybe you can just tell us simply, Eric once mentioned that you may be able to go ahead, take your marriage contract or your business contract, and you can upload something like that to the blockchain and preserve it. Any knowledge of this? Any information on this?
Yeah, I was at the first blockchain ever wedding back in Florida with Eric.
Really?
2014. Yeah.
Wow. So how does that work? How, for somebody who
Listen, it's this information that you put on this giant database.
Okay.
It's no need to get more complicated than that. It's information that you put onto this ledger. But here's the thing: a lot of people think that because it's a blockchain, it has magic powers. It really doesn't have magic powers. I mean, I could say Nick is a really mean guy and put that on the blockchain.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't make it true, right?
Okay. So are there blockchain trolls just like trolls elsewhere?
I think there's a lot of blockchain snake oil.
Okay.
So people trying to procure funding using the word blockchain when they really mean to say sophisticated database. I think you need a blockchain, or the blockchain, because I'm a bit of a maximalist here.
Okay.
If you're trying to solve the double spend problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If you're not trying to solve the double spend problem, you probably want a sophisticated database.
Okay. All right. And for a final, can you give us a resource? Final question here before I ask you to tell people where they can find you and get in touch if they should need you or your firm's services. Can you give them a resource, an initiation type of resource, where for the person who knows nothing about the blockchain, nothing about Bitcoin, where do they need to start to educate themselves somewhat so that they can come into you and have some questions that may be a little bit of education to come in with the right questions?
Yeah. Bitcoin.com is really good. It's run by Roger Ver. He's awesome, very, very knowledgeable. One of my favorite people in the space, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, Bitcoin.com, just search around on Google. I mean, we've never had, information has never been so readily available. And, if you're looking for beginner stuff on the subject, just doing a basic, what is Bitcoin? Search.
And find some resources and start learning on your own.
Yeah.
Okay.
And play around with it. Get on an exchange, which I'm not gonna.
You're not mentioning which ones, but get on one.
Yeah, buy a little bit of it, just a little bit, and send it to someone else, and see how that works out for you.
Excellent. So, and I would love to go on with this, and maybe in the future, I'd love if you're willing to have you back, and hopefully, if we see any legislation coming down the pike, you can come back and discuss with us exactly what that legislation may be or what it's trying to achieve. Until then, where can people get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you? And I'll put those in the notes.
Just hit me up on Twitter. I'm new to the Twitter game, but I'm trying my best to be a hip human being.
And doing very well, I might add. And I think I'm going to respell that, Bitcoin Khaleesi.
Yes.
And because
Bitcoin Khaleesi.
Yeah.
And you can send me an email at Adella Toulon at cogentlaw.co. That's always good. Actually, Nick, I thought we were going to talk about the Assembly Bill 1326.
Oh, we do have legislation.
Yeah, you guys do, but we can talk about it next time.
Let's say, can we talk about it in about 5 minutes, do you think?
We can do it in shorter time. It's basically,
Let's do it.
Assembly Bill 1326 was recently reintroduced by the legislature, and it was read and amended. Basically, it's not a license, but people transacting with Bitcoin or companies transacting with Bitcoin would have to sign up for something very ominous sounding called the, what is it? Oh, shit. Digital Currency Business Enrollment Program. There's a $5,000 fee. I'm still going through this thing. And I think there's a $2,500 rolling fee. So if you want to pay that every year.
Is this a state assembly bill?
It's an assembly bill that was reintroduced by the legislature. So I don't know where they are on that right now, but it certainly is there. So
okay, interesting.
Right?
Yeah, well, we can. We certainly can. Because I was imagining, I did not know that there was. That sounds awful. That sounds like intrusive government. It does sound that way, Jay. It sounds digital currency business enrollment program. Do you know if this is in its AB? What is it again?
Assembly Bill 1326, AB 1326.
Is this a California state law, Virginia state law?
Yeah,
it is California.
Cali.
It is. I was going to, my experience at the legislature in California was many years ago, and I was like, AB sounds like a California bill. So I did not realize that they were working on this. And you're right, Jay. If it is California, I assure you, that's intrusive government. I can assure you from personal experience.
I remember this great song. What is it? I am Senator Jerry Brown. My R smiles and never frowns. Soon I will be president. California Uber Alles. Remember that?
Vaguely.
Yeah.
It sounds vaguely familiar. I don't know that I remember, but it definitely seems to be about accurate. And now I need to go and do some serious research on AB 1326 because it will not surprise me if it's costly for anybody who's doing digital currency enrollment. And I'm quite positive there will be heavy fees included with that, and that it will be quite intrusive and probably quite exhausting for anybody who must do it. It's going to
a barrier to entry, stifle on innovation. I mean,
that's the California government for you. That's what they do best. It's what they do best.
Not my circus, not my monkeys.
No, but it may be one day. You may
That's
have
true.
because you may have 50 states creating these types of things.
This is true. This is very, yeah, this is, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So it will be really interesting to see how they work with this. Kill it like a weed. Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to happen, Jay. They seem to be able to pass anything in California. We have passed to end plastic bags at convenience stores and many other things that are, you know, really right at the top of the every voter's concern. So Adella, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I would like to have you come back because this is advancing so rapidly, especially for those who are not active in it on a daily basis, that I would like to reach out in a few months and have you come and update us on, and maybe in that time frame, maybe we'll look for and address specific pieces of legislation such as AB 1326, so that we can really inform the listeners as to what is happening in digital currency and the law.
Yeah.
This has been more of an introductory piece, which was good. We generally work with startups, but this was totally separate from what we normally do, and I'm glad you came on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It really has been. And next time we could kind of delve into like FinCEN, the SEC,
Yeah.
All these other bodies. It'd be great.
Yeah, I think that would be really good. And thank you, Jay, for being here. But I think we needed some introduction in order to maybe go on in a few months with something more detailed. So I appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
My pleasure. You were a wonderful guest to have. I've loved it. And you're all smiles and like to have fun, and I appreciate that. It's great.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Have a good day. All right. Bye-bye.